the bigger the problem, the higher the consciousness. Like the greatest leaders focus on the biggest problems because it raises their consciousness to higher levels. And so the bigger the problem that you focus on, the more kind of energy positive energy that can bring to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. I am Adam Hill and I got a great guest for you today. In the world of entrepreneurship and high achievement, anxiety exists a lot of times with people like that. And I think a lot of you can relate in the audience. Am I right? Well, from a young age, Charlie Stevenson struggled with anxiety and depression. And in his 20s, while studying in Boston, he took his mental health challenges full send and spent the better part of 2 decades studying how his mind and body work through seminars, retreats, and various studies. And traveling around the world to nearly 60 countries, he took his questions with him, studying meditation in Japan, Thailand, and Nepal, and attending a discourse with the Dalai Lama in India. How cool is that? While he's still learning to figure it all out, and of course, which we all are, his purpose is to share what he's learned with others and help connect people with their purpose and authentic selves. His goal, to impact 1 million lives by 2030 in this space. As a serial entrepreneur, Charlie is currently scaling an impact-focused commercial real estate investment business called Akras Capital. Akras acquires multifamily assets in the affordable housing space and keeps them rent accessible to the workforce. The resources Akras generates allows he and his partners to focus on their purposes of supporting people and their environment, integrating these two areas of their lives. He currently lives in Boulder, Colorado, which is a wonderful place, by the way, with his wife and soon-to-be baby daughter. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And they, of course, enjoy the mountains and all of that stuff all over the place. So welcome, Charlie. So good to have you here.
Adam. Yeah, man. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, just a little bit up the road from you, too. Yeah, we're both lucky to be in this part of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Until tonight when it snows, and just dumps snow on us.
I'm stoked for that. More reason to get up into the mountains, man. Just watch those avalanches. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's part of the fun here.
Awesome. Well, we need to dig into that because adventure is one of those key elements of rising above anxiety. But I kind of want to take it way back and look at how anxiety and depression kind of revealed themselves to you at an early age. What did that look like?
Yeah, I think having had lots of conversations about when kind of anxiety and trauma start with a lot of my peers and family members tends to be at an earlier stage in life. And for me, I had a pretty idyllic childhood until I was 7 and my family moved from one side of the state. I was from Washington State. We moved from this beautiful non-working farm near Seattle to a neighborhood on the eastern side of the state in a city called Spokane, which I actually thought was in China. When my parents first told me we were moving to Spokane, I was like, where in China is Spokane? Because it sounds Chinese. I don't know why. And but that was really disruptive to me. And we moved there and my parents were dealing with moving, a whole family. And my dad was a doc, so he was moving his practice. And my mom was getting a new community. And my brother and sister were young and crying and screaming. And they started, getting upset with each other now and again, as parents and as committed partners do. And, that freaked me out. All those disruptions in my early life created a lot of anxiety and insecurity around, is my home safe? Are my parents going to stay together? Yada, yada. And I started having some anxiety attacks when I was in 4th and 5th grade, right around the same time that they were putting us through the DARE program, where they're basically freaking us out about drugs. I was this is freaky. It sounds kind of fun, but also really scary. and that was sort of the trigger for it. And, didn't really maybe effectively deal with it. My parents, did the best they could. They got me into a therapy with a 60-year-old guy who was scarier than my dad. I didn't want to open up to him. So it was really a lot of languishing on with kind of a low level of anxiety through my kind of young and through high school, and really kind of went away when I went to college, but then new types of anxieties started showing up, and new stressors and things like this. So, it was kind of undealt with, let's say, mostly, except until I was in college and kind of on my own. And then I was like, I don't accept this. There's no way that this is, these fears and these anxieties need to persist. So I kind of started taking them on in a more meaningful, intentional way, as you mentioned in the intro. But yeah, so there's kind of the start of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. And that's interesting because you talk about when you got into college and primarily at a younger age, it was really not addressed in the way that, and that seems pretty common for people our age, is like, we had these fears, we had these anxieties as kids. We didn't know how to deal with them or what was going on.
Right.
But getting into college. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, it felt like it was very personal and just my own thing. I'd look around and it didn't seem like a lot of other people were dealing with these types of things. And it made me feel very like isolated and like weird and strangely unique. And so it wasn't until college that I was like, maybe there's more people dealing with this than just me,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
How did that affect your childhood in terms of your relationships or with other kids and things like that? Did it have any impact?
Sure. I kind of created this, I had a little bit of a point of view that is, I was never the one that was like the top pick for the soccer team. I was on the soccer team, but I was not like one of the top players, and I kind of, whether that was in sports or socially, I was never like the most popular kid. I was in a pretty good spot. Like I had good friends and things like this, but I was never, what I thought I should be. I was never kind of that idealized version of myself. And so the way that played out was I ended up going into a lot of independent types of things. Like when I didn't make the premier soccer team, I said, screw team sports. I'm going to play tennis. And I excelled at tennis because it's a very individualized sport. I'm going to excel at skiing because that's something that I can rely on myself for. While all my friends were applying for colleges in like Seattle and going to school out there, I was like, I want to do something really different. I'm going to go someplace totally unique. So I moved to Boston and went to school out there. Like I'm going to deviate from the herd, and that independence kind of became, like a hallmark or like a strong suit is the way that I would distinguish that. While it helps excel you, it also, it creates a lot of loneliness and a lot of isolation and a lot of self-isolation. So
sure.
It worked really well for my career. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur. I'm currently scaling my fourth business. So, with a variety of success and failure amongst those first three, but had an amazing experience building businesses. Like not very many of my friends did that. So, if I maybe had stayed in that kind of more typical path, I would have been in maybe a more typical career, which maybe that would have been fine. But I'm happy with the kind of variety of experiences I've had and challenges that those experiences have presented. So
yeah. Well, what's interesting about your story about how you kind of get to recognize that independence, and then you get into college and you kind of recognize, hey, maybe there is something different here. And it almost, and what's interesting, what speaks out to me too, because from my experience, I had a lot of that same kind of independent mindset of, I was pretty terrible at ball sports. So I did gravitate more towards things like tennis or playing the cello or things that I could excel at solely, but I didn't recognize that at the time. And it sounds like you had that kind of self-awareness. And when you went to college, you had this self-awareness that this is affecting me and maybe there's something I need to do about it.
Yeah, it was after I attended the first kind of like real introspective course I've ever done that had me identify that what that driving kind of force was. The kind of purpose of this course was you spend like an intensive weekend kind of involved in a long conversation about kind of what it is to be human and what are the general forces that shape our behavior, both positive forces and negative forces. And it helped us to just help me and the other folks that were in the midst of this course distinguish what we then called our point of view. And that point of view I recognized then was like, wow, I'm like not wanted by others was sort of the point of view. Others don't want me. So whether that's about a team or a career or, even committed, romantic relationships, that single idea or that story then became a filter through which I looked at most things in my life. And by distinguishing it, it created that little tiny degree of separation that's so critical in this work that allowed me to then disempower it and have it live in its own kind of separate thing so that it didn't affect, my actions that were rooted in commitment. So then I could say, okay, here's my point of view. It's saying this. And it still comes up, man. Like, just this last weekend, my wife went away, to Boston to visit some friends, and I had the weekend of myself. So I'm a bachelor. I'm just awesome. This is great. I'm going to go hang out with my buddies. And last minute, I reach out to a couple friends here in Boulder and no response. And I'm like, they don't want me. My friends, these are my best friends. I was literally the best man in this guy's wedding, and he's not responding to my, I was like, oh my God, there's my point of view. I haven't seen that in a while. It took my wife going away and me being a bachelor for a weekend for it to rear its head right there. I was like, wow, it's still there, it doesn't go away. But that distinction allowed me to stop and really enjoy the weekend. And I'm like, you know what? I still ended up going and finding some other friends to go do a ski tour with. And then I had a really nice, did a steak night, I made my own steak in my house and played some jazz way louder than my wife would usually want me to. I got a good bottle of wine. I really enjoyed it. But if I hadn't distinguished that back then and hadn't continued to work to distinguish it, I might have had kind of a depressed, lonely weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's a powerful self-awareness piece, because you named it and then you figured out, oh wow, this is the identity that I'm leaning into. And once you're aware of it, now you're all of a sudden you're able to disassociate with it. I love how you say you're disempowering it.
Yeah.
And it's not, and it doesn't go away. It's just doing push-ups until it rears its ugly head again.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Strengthening. Well, it's such a little creature now that it's I'm just flick it, but it still comes up now and again, it's little push-ups.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, the tools to address it are there. And so that initial kind of realization that sent you on your global trips around to try and find answers to these questions?
Yeah, sort of. I always really loved traveling and studied abroad when I was still in college, and out of that experience, and I was actually really in the midst of being challenged by my kind of anxiety and depression in my second and third year of college, and it was my third year of college that I went and studied abroad. And during that time, maybe it was the experience of going and moving to Italy and just the excitement of being wrapped up in it, that I also started a small business focused on bringing kids on adventure trips to go ski up in the Alps when I was out there. So all these exciting things started to happen that allowed me to really push on my passions, and the anxiety really just kind of melted away. And so the experience of being abroad helped me to kind of understand that this is something that's temporal. This is something that's impermanent, not something that's there all the time. Whereas when I was in Boston in my dorm room or in my apartment, kind of in this rut of normal living, it would just, where everything was quite easy, it would rear its head more often. And so I realized that, if I get out of that environment, sometimes I can get a little bit of a break from it. And that little break from it helped me realize that, wow, that's a choice in my life. That's not something that's always permanently there. And so that was the first time I distinguished it as something that was separate from a life that I had to live. And that was kind of the start of my experience in entrepreneurship, was living out in Italy and starting that adventure travel company that then kind of led to travel as a big part of my life. And then I realized that travel can be for a lot of different things. It can be for fun and just relaxation, but it can also be for adventure, athletic venture, and also personal and spiritual growth. And that's when I started seeing travel as something that could benefit both myself from a growth perspective, but also others. And that's when I started bringing cultural adventure travel to mostly American Study Abroad students, which is what my kind of second business was. And but that kind of began me seeing travel as a tool or a technique for personal growth and kind of purpose research and purpose realization. But there was, so that was kind of where travel began to serve that purpose.
And that's interesting. Yeah. You said something along the lines of pushing on passion and your anxiety melted away. I love how you say it melted away. So can you expand on that a little bit? How when you're pushing on your passion and that helps with the anxiety melting?
Right. So one of the things that was really helpful, a framework for me to kind of get some power over all this stuff, was that, if you think about your life as like an individual, like say you're looking at like an onion or a side view of, like concentric circles coming out from the center, and you're in the center. You've kind of got yourself in the very center, and then you've got the first ring would be the closest members of your community, your family, and then the next would be like the actual community that you're in, and then the next ring would be, say your country or your society, and the greater one is the world. Like when if this was sort of your different spheres of influence that a human being has over the course of their life, most of us are kind of playing between the level of self and the level of group or family or small group, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that when I'm really feeling anxious or depressed or frustrated or just demotivated, I'm usually really focusing on myself. Like, why am I not happy? Like, why can't I have, excitement and pleasure and like great things happening in my life? Like, it's kind of like a very individualized conversation. But the second that I look out of that smallest center of that little diagram and look out one level at my family, I start saying, hey, Christina, my wife Christina, or hey, my brother Pete, or my best friend Gary, or something like this. If I start asking them, how can I support you? What can I do for you? Like, a lot of times those very individualized concerns and anxieties and frustrations just sort of disappear. Mm-hmm. And so that's like a very hyper local way of addressing anxiety and depression, by focusing externally of yourself. Now, you got to kind of have health to be able to do that. There's some basic needs that need to be taken care of. Like, you can't just start like trying to take care of the community if your physical health is really, really terrible and you're sick, or your mental health is so in such crisis mode that you just want to sleep all the time. But if you get that break from that for even a moment and can start looking at others and supporting others, then a lot of times that single purpose can melt the kind of original anxiety and depression that you might be experiencing. And then when you start going much bigger than that and start focusing on solving much bigger problems at the level of like community or nation or world even, there's this amazing quote that I heard recently that is, the bigger the problem, the higher the consciousness. Like the greatest leaders focus on the biggest problems because it raises their consciousness to higher levels. And so the bigger the problem that you focus on, the more kind of energy positive energy that can bring to you. So but when you start focusing on really big problems, like your own like piddling anxieties about like money or not living the ideal life that is you want, or like saying the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, like that stuff just doesn't even, it stops even entering into the equation. It's no longer even a concern. It kind of fluxes and flows, in and out. But like, that's, I guess, like when you find that passion or find something purposeful that you care about and you start pushing on it and start working on it, a lot of that very individualized anxiety stuff starts to just kind of go away.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I love that approach. And I know for a lot of people who get into that phase of depression or anxiety, I mean, it's almost kind of like this downward spiral where you start to immerse yourself even more into the self, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you break out of that funk to focus more outward?
I love this question. And I'll just say, like, this is a struggle over the course of my life. Like, you can read 1,000 books and you can listen to the Dalai Lama give a speech in the Himalayas that's just like the most incredible wisdom you've ever heard. And you still find yourself getting embroiled in the annoying nuances of your own individual life experience. It fluxes and flows. Staying aware of it's the first critical thing. I would say that for me, when I find myself I call that the morass. When I find myself in like a mucky swamp, which is what my wife and I distinguish that as, there's a couple things that we do. Really, it's like our brain chemicals are against us at that point in time, or they're not pumping enough. And so really the things that are my exit from the morass are getting some exercise, some aerobic exercise, like really going and getting a run in. I love to run and trail run, or like getting on an assault bike at the gym or something like this, having someone hold me account to doing it. And then going and doing that. And that's usually enough to create a little bit of a gap between the kind of just the constant chatter of the monkey mind and get out of the morass to get a second of, okay, things are actually all right. I'm going to be able to handle this. I'm going to get on top of it. In addition to that, my wife and I use a gratitude exercise. So if one of us is really in a crappy spot and we recognize that in each other, we'll say, hey, give me 10 things you're grateful for, or 5 things you're grateful for. And then you sit there and you struggle through it. And then by the 4th or the 5th, you're like, you know what? I'm actually grateful for that plant over there, or the fact the sun's shining, or the fact that I live in Boulder, Colorado. This is an amazing place. I forgot how awesome this is. Or the fact that I have a roof overhead. Wow. That's actually really something to be grateful for too. Like a gratitude exercise can really help bring perspective to the BS that you're stuck in, usually. Yeah. Now there's definitely some profound things that can get in the way too. But the first thing that came to my mind when you asked me that question was, I just installed a plunge pool in my backyard on my patio. It's a cold plunge pool, like Wim Hof style kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And man, that gets you out of it pretty quick. So the mornings from my experience personally, and then listening to a lot of other people that struggle with this stuff, the mornings tend to be hard because you got all that latent energy ready to go. You got your day in front of you, you got a to-do list in front of you, maybe you just have an energy barrier to get into your stuff. The plunge pool, or getting into a cold immersion, or leaning into the pain equation in order to produce pleasure. There's lots of different ways to do that. Exercise, one of them too. But like leaning into the pain a little bit can produce a big dopamine release. It gets the epinephrine and norepinephrine pumping, which is kind of that physiological fear-based response, which then results in the dopamine release. And that gives you a nice degree of separation as well in a really short period of time. Like I jump in my cold plunge. It's a 35 to 45 degree cold plunge. It's really just a horse trough full of cold water, but it stays cold for 3 minutes. I get out of that. Things are clear. I feel better. My body feels relaxed. So that's kind of a quick, easy button to push.
Yeah,
sort of.
and I'll tell you that most of the audience that's listening right now just tuned that out and said, "No way, I'm not jumping in cold water." But I'm telling you, I do it every morning too, and it's so amazing. It's good. So great. Yeah,
it's good.
And it really does get you out of that funk. So that's an awesome.
Awesome. A cold shower, man. That also works too. Give yourself 20 or 30 seconds in a cold shower, and that can help you start thinking more clearly and get out of that little funk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love those. I love those answers to get out of. Get out of that funk. So it's really kind of starting with getting that, that aerobic exercise, getting the chemicals working, serving others or thinking outside of yourself. And then gratitude. Yeah. The gratitude kind of thermometer is great. That's always hard. I even get through that funk too, of just constantly, diving in, because we tend to think like the anxiety that's in our head is it's so magnified in terms of like what it's telling us. It's like, but it's not always the worst thing. It's not always that bad if we just get out of it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just something my wife and I always say to each other is like, everything that you're thinking right now is not real, right? Like that's not real, right? That's just a series of neural pathways that have been triggered by some stimuli. Like it's, in all reality, you're sitting in a room and it's, probably quite peaceful and pleasant because we're here in the United States of America. And there's there's no saber-toothed tiger chasing after you. No one's like probably aiming a gun at you. There's really no true necessary trigger for your amygdala. There's no real fight, flight response that's necessary. So all of that stuff you're feeling is just your own creation. So if you can get that second of like separation from it and then get on top of it, then it gets easier. I'd say to keep myself away from it, meditation is also like a really critical thing. That's a daily practice I have, between minimum 5 minutes, but if I'm happy, if I'm able to get into it, 20 to 30 minutes of meditation keeps me above falling into that space. But if I'm traveling or work gets really stressful or some big thing that's disruptive to my normal day-to-day life, like that's when you can fall back into that kind of frenetic morass, that funk, as we've been saying.
Yeah. Well, that's huge, and I think it brings us into a great kind of question that I would ask is what does a day look like for you? Do you typically experience that? If you experience any kind of that anxiety, if it starts to creep in or that depression, does it usually happen at a certain time of day? And what does your morning routine look like, or your daily routine, and how to prevent it?
Sure. Yeah. It definitely has a pattern. There's no doubt about that. My pattern. So when things are going pretty well and I'm feeling pretty good, like I'd say that my mental well-being is somewhere like a 7 out of 10, and it can go be up above that if there's things that are going really great. But it usually doesn't fall much below like a 6 or a 7, which I feel pretty good about. And and the pattern that I see is typically it's related to things that I need to do, like getting overwhelming. Like if I've got too many things related to work that I need to do, plus like my family commitments and purpose commitments, like kind of building up on like a Monday morning or something like this, like Sunday night or Monday morning before I need to get the week really kind of going. That's kind of when that stuff will kind of like rear its ugly head. Yeah. The other pattern is when I've been in kind of a disruptive schedule, like I've been traveling a lot for work, or even traveling for fun, and I come back from that and I'm not in my normal health and fitness routines. Plus I have all those like to-dos, like a lot of like overwhelm starts to creep up around, getting things done and getting into a flow. And so, but once I break through that energy barrier and I get into a good flow and my kind of domestic routines are back in place, then things tend to get back up into a good spot. But that's those like kind of thresholds, or let's call them transitions, tend to be where I find the most anxiety and depression kind of rear its head. Also, end of year, coming into the new year, like really the hardest time of the year for me. I just came out of it. Like middle of November until like Christmas really is like the most stressful time of the year. It's getting dark. All the leaves and all the plants are dying. Everything's kind of dying around you. You got all these extra stresses related to like holiday preparation, end of year planning, end of year reporting, preparing for the next year, strategy wise for work, things like this. So it all kind of just comes to a head right at that time of the year. And I've distinguished that and am more and more aware of it. But every single year, it still kicks my butt. Every year. True. It's like mid of November comes around and we fall back and it's like, oh my gosh, I just want to get to like a bright light environment. What the second part of your question was like, how do I prevent that from kind of happening? Like, how do I,
kind of what's your daily routine? What do you do in the morning routine kind of just to keep you out of it?
Yeah. So let's say before I added the plunge pool in, but I guess that's part of it. It's getting up, making sure I get myself enough quality sleep. So my day starts the night before is making sure that I'm managing my sleep cycle and getting healthy sleep. Sleep is so critical for my mental health. I've really realized that over the course of the last, let's say year and a half. I bought this watch that tracks all my sleep cycles and stuff. And that's really made a big difference. So I make sure that I get the sleep that I need. And then the next morning I wake up, if I've gotten the sleep that I need, then I wake up at a decent hour, let's say like 7 a.m. or something, 7:30, and I get my morning routine going, which is always starts with meditation or like a couple minute cold plunge, and then a meditation where I'm just watching my breathing and kind of the Vipassana style, where you watch your breathing and try to quiet your mind. I have an affirmation that I say right at the end of that meditation that I say every single day that helps me to essentially create a commitment to staying aware of my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and pain, to like stay essentially on top of them, because they otherwise will start to, kind of take over. So if I stay aware of those things, then and create that degree of separation, things tend to go a lot smoother. And then over the course of the day, like I'm trying to, stay focused and doing the things that I need to do in my business, in my purpose stuff, taking care of my family and friends and things like this. And then as I do recognize thoughts, feelings, emotions, and pain, the awareness, I use these beads, these bracelets to help identify. So if I recognize a thought or a feeling or an emotion of pain and I get one step of removal from it, I'll move, this bracelet from this wrist to this wrist. And that helps me to just remember. So I have all my bracelets start on my left wrist in the morning, and by the end, hopefully they've moved to the right, and that shows that I'm strengthening my awareness. Wow. And so that's one thing that I do in order to stay tangibly aware of all that stuff. And the end of the day, I kind of just like try to wind down. I do like a shutdown ritual from work and commitments and things like this. So I'll intentionally look at everything I needed to do that I didn't get done today, make sure that it's taken care of the next day, and I'll literally do a shutdown ritual, put that stuff away, and then get myself rest and take care of my personal well-being. And that a lot of times looks like exercise, different types of cold or heat immersion, reading, things like this. One thing I didn't mention is I also do exercise. So usually that's incorporated in my morning routine. But right now I'm dealing with an ankle injury that I got from a trail run recently. So otherwise, I would start with usually a run or something like this, or some kind of strength training exercise, and then go into my meditation. So that's the one thing I did not mention. But yeah.
Well, good for you though for recognizing too that injuries like that, for having alternatives to exercise when you're injured, because not a lot of people think that. They just think, I'm going to power through it. I'm going to, but that's that just trying to work out or push yourself through injury is anxiety inducing. It messes with our mental health too.
Absolutely.
So that's huge.
That's been something new for me in just the last year to two, is finding those alternatives for when I can't go for a trail run. Right. The plunge pool basically helps with that, or going and getting some strength training, or just being gentle on myself and being like, you don't need to work out today to have super great mental health. You can actually have a rest day and be okay with that. So that's also part of something that I've distinguished for myself. So
yeah, just a little bit of grace for yourself. That's awesome. Yeah.
Totally.
And so how does you kind of mentioned you get into skiing and you do a lot of outdoor stuff. You do a lot in the mountains because you live in Boulder. What role does adventure play in your mental health and how you get above it?
This is huge. So it's one of the values that I have in my life is adventure and being outdoors in the environment. I'd say that what getting into the outdoors does, especially when I'm solo, is it strips away all the stimulation that we have in our kind of modern society, and allows me after like a decompression period. It doesn't happen immediately. It's not like once I'm in the trees, I'm just like, oh, everything's so clear. No, it takes a little bit, but
sure.
That can happen in as quickly as 10 minutes, or it might take an entire day, depending upon what my nervous system's been stimulated with over the course of the last previous time period. But I get into nature, and after a period of time, whatever those rhythms or whatever that energy is out there really calms me down and allows me to start thinking really, really clearly. So it's sort of like going home a little bit when I go into nature. When I need to do my most clear thinking, I retreat into the woods and to the most remote place that I can. Sometimes that's just like a park nearby, but if I have my choice, it's getting deep into some kind of a pristine wilderness. Some of the best retreat work I've ever done has been solo backpacking trips in the mountains and dunes and stuff around Colorado. Some of the biggest breakthroughs I've personally experienced was doing a solo backpacking trip where I was just out there by myself and dealing with fear and looking at the stars and kind of trying to figure things out and reading books and meditating. And so it plays a big part, but it's also just wicked fun. I love being up in the mountains. I love getting into environments that are a little scary and knowing that I got a skill set that can mitigate that risk and get out of it safely and have a ripping good time with my buddies and high five. And, so that's a big part of it too. It's just it's a place where I go play. And that's an important part of my own personal self-care, is being able to go out with my buddies or go by myself and just go play in the wilderness, just be kind of stupid and have fun for just the sake of pushing the limits a little bit, in a risk mitigated way. So, yeah.
How important is it that you, because you mentioned solo as far as some of those backpack trips, do you have any kind of intentionality?
Intentionality.
What's the word there?
It's one of those weird ones. It's
that's a weird one.
What I'll do is before I go. So if it's like a retreat that I'm I'm taking this time for myself to go and do some work, then I'll journal for maybe a period of time. That's something else I actually do incorporate in my morning routine is journaling a little bit here and there too. Not every day, but let's say every other day or a few days. I'll journal about it. I'll say, all right, what are my intentions for this? What are the things in my life that I'm challenged by that I would love to have a breakthrough in? I'm not going to be attached to having a breakthrough there, but if I can get out there and read a passage in a book and have some breakthrough there, that would be really awesome to come home with. So I'll write down a few things that I'm challenged by, and then I'll go out into the woods or out into the area where I'm headed with maybe a book and a plan to do some meditation every day, and do some swimming in the water or whatever it is I can find for fun. And then I kind of just let things happen naturally. I don't want to stress myself out. I have a tendency to want to figure it all out and structure it too much. But when I do that, I tend to force outcomes, and then it doesn't feel like an authentic realization or breakthrough. So now I just try to let things kind of naturally happen, and I'll, kind of give myself the freedom to have fun back there too. I'll intentionally meditate. I'll read a book that is related to maybe the topic that I'm curious about learning about or having a breakthrough in. And usually that kind of mixture of ingredients tends to produce some kind of result that's really meaningful. Maybe I didn't expect it going in, but it was great that it came out. And sometimes it was something that I expected that I went in to solve, I'll come out with, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll come out without anything. Sometimes I'll come out more confused than when I went in, like, frankly. I'll be like, oh my God, there's actually a lot more work I need to do on this subject than I realized. That's not my favorite. That's not my favorite outcome.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's an important one. Yeah.
Yeah. But even that confusion is more clarity, right? Because you're like, oh wait,
Sure.
yeah, I do have more. But
Yeah.
I mean, at least, and it sounds like getting into that zone of, and you mentioned kind of like letting it happen without having to force outcomes, because that perfection seems to be an obstacle to flow. Like your idea of just wanting to be perfect. What how do you see flow in your life? Like what does flow look like to you?
Yeah, flow looks like to me when I have abundance amount of energy and a clear clear target to focus that energy on, where I'm just like boom, 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 just moving through it. Okay, the next thing I need to do is this. It's obvious to me. Like it's like when I was a kid playing video games like Sonic the Hedgehog, and there was just like the next move is very obvious and just in front of me and clear. Like that's kind of what flow feels like when I have an abundance of natural energy and motivation, and my purpose is obvious, and I can just like knock things down. And I go in and out of that. I'd say it's very seasonal. I'd say like I get maybe a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks of that a quarter or something like that. And when I have it, I'm just like, baby, let's go. Like, just let's roll. 'Cause I can get a lot of stuff done and make a lot of impact in that period of time. And when I'm not in it, that's really obvious too. And I'm always like, how do I get back into that? But it's usually just a function of these different behaviors and patterns and, habits that I have that will line me up to get into that flow state.
I love it. Yeah. And that definition is so clear and concise, just an abundance of energy and a place to focus that energy. That's so good. Right. So good. And so speaking of impact, because you mentioned, just making the most impact, it seems that all of your entrepreneurial efforts have been designed to kind of create some impact in our world, not just to return money for the investors and things like that, though that certainly is the case. But can you kind of walk us through some of those some of those businesses you've started and where you're going to now on that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've never really thought about it that way. A lot of times, like I'd say out of the 4 businesses I've started, 2 of them started off, well, let's just say like, okay, let's take two of the businesses that I'm thinking of right now. Started with very kind of like personal need fulfillment as the initial goal. Like when I started that travel company that was based out in Italy, it was because I really wanted to go travel and like have fun and ski the Alps and, live in the Mediterranean, have this experience, but and make some money doing that. But then once I was out there after like operating that business for the first year, I realized like, oh my gosh, like these American students that were taking on these trips are like learning and having some real life experiences. Like this is real life we're affecting here. And it took on a whole new purpose. Yes, we were taking care of our own personal needs and having a ripping fun time doing it. But we realized that there was a bigger purpose that we kind of stumbled into very naturally and authentically. And so we pushed the button there and we're like that ended up becoming sort of the main competitive differentiation for that adventure travel business I started, because all of the universities that were used to venture travel companies bringing their kids to like party in Dublin or Barcelona or just get drunk in the Alps or something, we were the ones that were bringing them to like cultural and adventure travel. And they're like, oh, these guys are actually like nice people and they want to actually teach our students something about life. And so that ended up becoming our differentiation. The same thing happened with like this latest venture we have, which is in the commercial real estate space. My wife and I and our other business partner wanted to create a business that allowed us to live a life that we wanted, a life of freedom. We wanted to not have to work for somebody else. We wanted to be able to travel anywhere we wanted around the world and spend as much time as we wanted with family. That was sort of the initial why for Akras Capital. And after kind of actualizing that why and generating passive income such that most of our financial needs were taken care of, and having all the time to go travel, like spending months working remotely, island hopping through the Greek islands, and spending all the time we wanted with our family. We were kind of sitting around, and like I remember I was on this beach in Greece, and like I've got the most beautiful view in front of me, and like nothing except like a month in front of me with my wife to just explore this beautiful culture. And while that was really incredible and I was having a great time, there was also something that was missing. And I was like, wait a second, we reached the goal that we had set with Akras in the beginning, but something else is kind of missing here. It wasn't totally satisfying. And it was a little bit of a scary realization. Cause I was like, oh my gosh, like what else do we need to do? Like we figured like eventually this business would generate enough wealth for us that we could then retire and then start focusing on other people and bigger communities and taking on bigger challenges in the world. But what about right now? And that started this kind of existential crisis for my two partners and I to say, all right, how do we bridge the gap between that outcome, because we think that's going to be the most motivating and satisfactory both for ourselves and for all the stakeholders in our world and our communities, and where we are right now, which is just having kind of this like selfish need taken care of. And so we started saying, all right, we need to integrate impact into our model. That needs to be something we start doing right now before we have, all the money we need to be able to build a foundation or whatever it might be. And we took that on and said, what in our current realm of commercial real estate, where are the biggest crises out there? Well, there's an affordable housing crisis, right? We buy multifamily apartment complexes. So we can pretty easily direct that, the resources that this business generates, the money, the time, the network power towards that crisis. And by buying certain types of assets that are in neighborhoods where the workforce lives, in communities where there's a burgeoning need for workforce housing, we can make an impact there. So why not just focus our efforts on that and figure out how the business model makes sense for our investors and our own partners' financial needs. And so that's what we took on, is like, how can we then buy the right types of assets that then have the right resident population that we can really affect change in. And that became sort of the primary focus for our main business's efforts. And then any additional resources that our business generates, we can then take and then move towards, areas of impact that we care about outside of the commercial or the housing space. So, I care a lot about the environment and men's mental health and people's mental health. So I can take some of the time that I generate and the money that I generate to focus on that. My wife really cares about empowering women, and so she focuses her extra efforts on that. My other partner, Lending, focuses on empowering immigrants and giving them a foothold in America. So besides the affordable housing thing, primary kind of focus of our business, we have our own individual purposes that the resources our business generates help us to then focus on. So we're setting some big goals, and that's holding us accountable to achieve them and seek feasible opportunities to achieve them. So that's how we've kind of integrated our personal professional lives with that back to that diagram that I was talking about early on, like how do we look outside of just our own needs? And that's what's been truly the most satisfying.
Yeah. Well, that's huge. And it's so important that this point is so important. And I'm really, really glad you're doing this work that you're doing, because it's so, I won't say it's easy, but that the path to least resistance and things like that are not to look at the impact that you might be having on the community. It might be just like, all right, well, what's my fastest path to a return on to shareholders or return to this, and not being aware of that. But kind of gets back to something you said early on, which is, the first step to anything like this is just the awareness, is being aware of it. And you're aware of, the impact that you're having on these communities, and that's huge. And I hope you realize that impact that you're making in that world, in a space that desperately needs it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, we're working to figure it out. There's all kinds of really interesting models out there that can be employed that are different than what a lot of our peers are doing in the industry, that both address this really critical need, but also provide really pretty amazing returns to investors in the different partnership groups. And so it took us some time to kind of discover those models and what markets those models are effective. But we're really excited about that. And we don't want to keep them secret. We want to share these so that lots of operators like ourselves can do that and address this need. This isn't like, this is more people doing this is more kind of a thing. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is build a big community of like-minded folks that we want to partner with and work with, and who want to invest alongside us so that we can, affect change in affordable housing in a real outsized way, but also, take care of, other fellow humans in different ways with the resources that those investments generate. So this is kind of becoming like our flag that we're planting on the mountain and trying to, this is the direction we want to go, and we're going.
Well, it's so good, and full disclosure, I'm an investor in Akras Capital, and this is not a any kind of a financial advice or anything like that, but yeah, man, it makes me proud to see what you're doing within this space, and through that, and then of course, kind of getting into the impact that you're growing into, which is this helping people and helping men specifically, as you said, with mental health and empowering them. What are you looking at there, and what's coming in the future for that? Yeah,
thanks for asking that question. So right now, what I'm still doing is distilling exactly, because frankly, while I've done a lot of work on this stuff, I'm still figuring it out myself and still trying to understand, all right, what's exactly like a dependable model. I have business training and process and systems training. So I'm always trying to think of what's a model that is like a predictable input output type of a system that can be replicated again and again. So I'm in the midst of trying to determine exactly what that is. So if someone came to me that was like really frustrated and not stoked with the way their life is going, and they're feeling depression or anxiety and a lack of purpose, what are the things that I could suggest to them in a formulaic way that they could plug in? It'd be go into the woods for 45 minutes and meditate, and read this book and attend this seminar and whatever. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like right now. That's what I'm working on. What I'm really doing at this moment in time is just setting goals that I can be held accountable to. So I want to impact 1 million lives in this space by 2030. That's the goal that I'm setting, and I'm working on the model to do that. And I'm not exactly sure what that's going to end up looking like. Right now, it's just a lot of individual conversations, hyper-local conversations with other men and women and different people, so I can continue to learn myself and educate myself, but also dispense any advice or wisdom that I've gathered in the course of my meandering experience to try to make their life a little bit modicum of a degree of better. So that's kind of what it looks like right now. I sometimes host little seminars. There's a men's group that you and I are both involved with, where I had the opportunity to kind of lead a conversation around sort of the pursuit of happiness, or the false pursuit of happiness. What does that mean? Where I just had an opportunity to share with 30 or 40, other folks about my experience. And that's one tangible action I've taken, but a lot of just kind of building a network and a community of people that have this similar focus, so I can better understand how I can make an outsized impact as efficiently as possible. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and then some. I mean, I think it's huge that you're doing that, and the fact that you're just meeting on a one-on-one basis with people is going to be huge, to be able to find that path to helping 1 million people that you're looking for. And
one at a time.
How can people reach you to be part of that conversation?
Yeah. So I'll provide my contact information in the footer or the thumbnail of this video. But my email is cstevenson@akrascapital.com. You'll find it down there. And then I'll also include a link to my Calendly. So if you want to book some time with me to talk about, your own finding your own purpose, and maybe some tips on what that looks like, what you can do, books to read, whatever that might be. I'm happy to be a resource to anybody listening to this there. If you do want to talk about multifamily investing or that commercial real estate investing space, happy to be a resource to you as an investor or operator there. Always just looking to grow my community of like-minded folks. So feel free to reach out and book a time directly on my calendar. And Thanks, Adam, for the chance to share that. And you can find me on all the different social media, places. I'm not super active at posting, but you'll find little snippets of things that I'm doing on Facebook and things like this. And then our website is Akras Capital, AKRAS capital.com. And we, have information about how to reach us there as well.
Awesome. Well, it's so generous of you to offer that up and to be a resource to people, especially given your experience. You are a man of adventure. You're a man who has overcome a lot of mental health issues of his own to rise above them and actually turn them into superpowers and become successful in the process. I'm really grateful to know you. And I just have one final question, because I know you're having a baby soon. And congratulations first off.
Thank you.
But anything you can from your experience with growing up with anxiety and things like that, what are you hoping to bring to your new son or daughter's life on that?
Yeah, it's a daughter, and I'm glad you asked that question, because my wife and I are having conversations about this right now. It's like, what does our parenting look like? What does this little creature's life, like, what are they putting in our hands? And one thing that we're doing is we're looking back at our experience growing up and looking at the things that worked and the things that didn't work. Like, what really amazing values did our parents on both sides bestow upon us? What are some of the things that didn't work so well that created, consternation or anxiety or depression? Like, what advice would I give my father, when his 8-year-old came home from, that DARE presentation, freaked out about, life and having had an anxiety attack? Like, what would I be to my daughter if that happened? And so I'm using, and I think like the thing that my wife and I absolutely know right off the bat is that we want to develop as much openness in communication between her and us. And then also just really cultivate mindfulness as early as she is intellectually able to understand what that idea is, which I think is probably pretty young. I want to start helping her identify what her commitments and what she cares about from thoughts, feelings, emotions, and pain that just crop up and just run a million miles in your brain. Like, oh, there's that little thing. Give her some bracelets. I don't know. Just as long as she doesn't swallow them, but yeah, give her anything that we've learned that helped us over time as early as possible. So she just doesn't need to deal with all that BS that I went through from like 10 to, let's say, 21 or something like that. Definitely. Give her an 11-year advantage on us, you know what I mean? And just create a really like amazing, powerful woman that's out there doing some good in this world. So
that's fantastic. Well, That's such great closing wisdom, Charlie, and I'm so grateful that you're able to share that and everything today. It's been an awesome hour to spend with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes. I'm looking forward to shaking your hand in 2030 as you've helped as you pass the 1 million people mark on.
Thanks, man. Adam, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was an awesome time, and you're an amazing human being too. And just getting out there and bringing these good vibes to the world, man. It's such an honor to be here, and excited to grow along with you, man.
Thanks, brother. And to the rest of you out there, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.